Over the last 12 years, Fantagraphics has been publishing this great line of hardcovers showcasing EC Comics. It's called the EC Comics Artists Library. They've done 37 volumes so far. There are only a couple, I think, rumored to be about 7 more beyond this, so we're getting closer and closer to the end. I've done a previous video showing off all these books, but since then there's been like 8 or 9 volumes added, so I wanted to update it. So this is every EC Artists Library hardcover by Fantagraphics so far. Stay tuned. Okay, so thank you for being here. Please subscribe. I'm doing 31 Days of Halloween horror comics, where every day of October I show off a different horror comic. Today, since horror was a staple of EC Comics, that's the reason why I'm putting out this video. But subscribe so you don't miss out any of my horror comics I'm showing off this month. And go back and watch some of my other ones. I have a playlist showing off every book I've shown off so far this month. So for this video, I'm just going to show off the covers, the spines, and the back cover, and talk a little bit about each volume. I'm not going to flip through them or anything because this video will be entirely too long. But I will try to show off or point out which ones are my favorite and that kind of thing as well. Drop any comments you have, any questions. I love talking comics. I love talking EC Comics, and I reply to all comments. So if you have any questions throughout this video, please feel free. So the first volume that was released was Corpse of the Imjin. This covers a lot of the war comics by Harvey Kurtzman. Here's a spine. Again, great spines. The cover of the book is right here on the top. And then they have like a little bit of an emoji or icon signifying what the story is about. Corpse of the Imjin. The titles of each hardcover are the same title as a story that's within the book. And then Harvey Kurtzman right there. And then Fantagraphics EC Library. And then here's the back cover. The next one that came out was Came the Dawn. This is Wally Wood. This is collecting some of his horror comics. Here's the spine. 50 Girls 50. This is Al Williamson. His only volume so far. I don't know that he did it much more. This might be his only EC volume that they have. I don't know that he did much more work to constitute another volume or not. And again, I'm not the expert on EC Comics. So if you have the answers to any of my questions or any of my hypotheses, by all means, put those in the comments as well. But this is a great volume if you're into sci-fi comics. Al Williamson is an absolute master of line work and whatnot, and his sci-fi comics are absolutely amazing. There's a reason why George Lucas tapped him to illustrate the adaptations of Star Wars into comic form. Tain't the Meat, It's the Humanity. This is Jack Davis's first horror volume. There's more later on, but these are Jack Davis horror comics. I did do a video earlier this month showing off Foul Play, which is the last volume I'll be showing off today. And it talks all about how Jack Davis does his cartoony looking art is perfect for horror, and it blends together perfectly into a good little mashup. But this is more of that same kind of material. Fall Guy for Murder by Johnny Craig. So Johnny Craig is my favorite crime EC artist, and this is collecting a lot of his crime comics. There's another volume later that I'll show you that's my favorite of Johnny Craig's volumes. But this is Fall Guy for Murder. So each of these volumes will typically collect one genre. It might blend into, like, crime and horror might be mixed into one volume, but typically they keep it to one genre. If you're not familiar, I should have said this too. EC dabbled in like 4 genres. They did war comics, they did horror comics, crime comics, and sci-fi comics. And that's what we're going to see here too. So Child of Tomorrow, this is Al Feldstein doing sci-fi stories. And the sci-fi comics were notoriously the lowest sellers for EC Comics back then, but they were the ones that William Gaines, the publisher, was most proud of. He thought his sci-fi comics were top-notch. And they were. I agree with him. 0 Hour, illustrated by Jack Kamen. So this is the first Jack Kamen volume we've seen. And for some reason, all the Jack Kamen volumes are pretty thin. I don't know. Interesting there. But Cool Tech and Hot Passion. So this is Jack Kamen doing sci-fi stories. Sucker Bait. This is the first of Ghastly Graham Ingels horror comic volumes. Ghastly Graham Ingels, he got that name because his artwork was just ghastly. All the line work and the sludgy and dirty, gritty zombies and stuff that he would draw really was a high point of the horror comics for EC. Hang on to your innards. Judgment Day by Joe Orlando. This is Joe Orlando's sci-fi comics, and Judgment Day is one of the most famous EC stories that everybody should read. It's like one of those, if you're going to read one EC story, read Judgment Day. I'd say that it's definitely one of those stories that's up there. And then Bomb Run is next. This is John Severin doing war comics. So Harvey Kurtzman was the one that kicked off the war comics for EC. And typically when Kurtzman did his war comics, he would do the layouts for them. So Kurtzman writes all these John Severin stories, and he would do the layouts for him. So John Severin would draw on top of the layouts. There is another John Severin volume later, which shows kind of him taking over the war comics when Harvey Kurtzman leaves EC. But John Severin was known for his very highly detailed, highly accurate uniforms and guns and artillery in war comics. Which EC in general, their war comics were known for that. Harvey Kurtzman took pride in having the accurate portrayal of those. Aces High by George Evans. So this is the first George Evans volume. It has a lot of his kind of dog fights and airplane fights in EC comics. Something that I think William Gaines, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think William Gaines was like anti-dog fights in comics because he thought that this stylistically they didn't look great on the page, but George Evans was the exception in that. And this is called Aces High for that reason. A Dance of Death in the Air. Spawn of Mars. So the Al Williamson volume is a great way to start with sci-fi, and I think this is the best way too. If anyone wants to say which sci-fi volume should I pick up, I usually recommend Spawn of Mars by Wally Wood. The next volume of this library that we've seen is called Spawn of Venus, and it's collecting more Wally Wood sci-fi stories, and that comes out next spring, I believe. That's the only other one that's been announced that we are aware of. But Spawn of Mars, Wally Wood was just one of the all-time great comic book artists in general, but his sci-fi stuff is where he really sung. And even says, what Star Wars was to science fiction, Wally Wood was to science fiction comics. A great quote by Joe Orlando. Grave Business and Other Stories, more of the Ghastly Graham Ingels comics, horror comics here. Just you can see just like the terror and such a great artist. Ghastly Graham Ingels, you can't go wrong with any of his horror comics for sure. Like, look at those rats. So, Grave Business is the next one. 40 Wax. This is Jack Kamen with his horror comics. So we saw him earlier. Again, a slimmer volume. And there's the back cover. High Cost of Dying. Here's Reed Crandall doing some crime comics. Great spine there. And on the back. Here's The Living Mummy. This is Jack Davis's second horror volume that we've seen so far. And it's funny reading the intro, which all these books have great intros, great historical context with things. They have intros that kind of go over each story, the behind the scenes of each story within the book, and kind of behind the scenes of EC Comics for each one. So when you have the whole library, you have like the best collection of EC history, in my opinion. But one thing I found interesting in the Foul Play volume, which I talked about in my video, was that Jack Davis wasn't the fondest of doing horror comics, but he did a lot, because there's at least 3 volumes, I think, there's three volumes of Jack Davis horror comics in this collection. Voodoo, Vengeance, and Other Stories. This is Johnny Craig doing horror. Johnny Craig, I think Jack Davis is my favorite of the EC artists. I think Johnny Craig would probably be my second favorite. Cleanest horror stories you've ever saw. That's a comment by Wally Wood. So, Ghastly Graham Ingels had like the dirtiest, grimiest looking horror. Johnny Craig was known for his clean line, and he had kind of the opposite. But having both of those in the same issue of comics would have been great. Which is where you would get these. Whenever you bought these off the stands, if you're a kid back in the 50s, you'd buy one issue and it'd have like 3 or 4 stories in it, 3 or 4 6 to 8 page strips in it by all different artists and stuff. So reading these is in a different context because you're getting just one artist throughout the whole thing. But reading the actual issues, which is why like how Dark Horse collects them, would be different because you're getting all the different artists. So it's really just like your opinion on how you want to collect them. Also, I should note, the Dark Horse ones are modern colored. So if you hate modern colorization, that's a good note. These are all black and white. I don't know if I mentioned that before or not, but these are collecting them all in black and white, which I think is great to see the beautiful line art by all these great artists. So this is the Million Year Picnic, Will Elder doing sci-fi stories. And Will Elder was known for his chicken fat, they called it, where in the backgrounds of all of the panels and stuff, there's these little details and things that he would add into the images that you'd kind of look out for and things, which warrant rereading of these stories too, because you might notice more things on future reads. The Thing from the Grave and Other Stories by Joe Orlando. So this is Joe Orlando doing horror comics. Daddy Lost His Head. Here's another Jack Kamen doing horror comics. Great, just terror on the faces there too. Just amazing figures and faces by Jack Kamen here. He's I think one of the more underrated artists in EC. You don't see his name come up a lot when people are talking about their favorites. Master Race by Bernard Krigstein, or Bernie Krigstein. The Master Race story is also one of those you have to read if you're going to only read a few stories of EC. That would be, you'd be remiss if you did not read that one. And Bernie Krigstein himself was an incredible artist in comics. I'm glad we have this volume. I don't think there's enough Bernie Krigstein material to do another volume of EC. If there is, I hope I'd be excited for that because he is such a great artist. But there's Bernie Krigstein. This is one of my favorite volumes in my whole set. My favorite war comics volume for sure. This is Jack Davis Death Stand. This is Jack Davis doing war comics over Harvey Kurtzman's layouts and writing. And I feel like their style, like Harvey Kurtzman had kind of a cartoony style anyways, and Jack Davis's style on top of it worked so perfectly. And when you have Harvey Kurtzman doing the layouts, it attributes the artist to be able to put in all the little details that he wants to because he's not focused on compositions and things. And just magical pairing for war comics in this volume. So if you want one volume of war comics, I would definitely pick up Death Stand. Doctor of Horror. This is another Ghastly Graham Ingels horror comic volume. Again, just like the grotesqueness of these hands coming out of the grave. There's a spine, the back cover. The origin of Ghastly. So this is the earliest of the Ghastly Graham Ingels, and why he got that name was in this volume. The Martian Monster, illustrated by Jack Kamen. So this is Jack Kamen doing sci-fi. The Woman Who Loved Life by Johnny Craig. This is one of the earlier volumes I picked up because I didn't pick these up in order. It wasn't even back to 2012. I was not picking these up, but it was over the last 5 years I've accumulated all these. So I picked them up out of order as I was kind of putting the collection together. Whenever I'd find them on sale or certain volumes on eBay and that kind of thing. So this is one of the earliest volumes I got, and this is what made me fall in love with Johnny Craig crime comics. In my entire comic book collection, I think this is one of my favorite collections of crime comics, period, is this one. So it's The Woman Who Loved Life by Johnny Craig. Here's the back cover. Atom Bomb and Other Stories. This is Wally Wood. Again, just the great work by Wally Wood here. And this is Wally Wood doing war comics. So Wally Wood was mostly known for his sci-fi and stuff, but he would dabble in war comics, which amazing. Like it even has a little bit of science fiction look into his war comics that he would add in. Man and Superman by Harvey Kurtzman. This is Harvey Kurtzman doing sci-fi. So Kurtzman would go on. He would start off with EC as just a typical artist, but then when he'd go on and become the editor of the war comics line, Frontline Combat and Two Fisted Tales, that's where he focused his attention on from there. And then he started Mad Magazine, and then his attention got focused on there. So there's not a lot of non-war, non-Mad EC work by Harvey Kurtzman, but this is one of those volumes that will collect his stuff in here. Terror Train. This is a thick volume by Al Feldstein. I think this was the thickest volume until we got Foul Play, which is the most recent one. This is Al Feldstein doing horror, mobsters, murders, mayhem, and mummies too. I just love that cover right there. That's just such a striking image. Accidents and Old Lace. This is another Ghastly Graham Ingels volume. Just amazing stuff. George Evans doing horror, which this is a great image, great cover here too, because you see most of the covers have like 2 images, but this one they really let it live on its own, which is kind of cool, kind of a cool cover design here. I should mention too that this entire line, the design of the lines and how they look, the design of the books and how they look and stuff was done by Jacob Covey, one of my favorite book designers in comics. 3 for the Money and Other Stories by Jack Kamen, Al Feldstein, and Ray Bradbury. So some of these later volumes of these will start collecting multiple artists or writers within them, because there was a bunch of stuff that EC would do that there wasn't enough material to fill up one of these volumes, so they're starting to pack it all in. And by the end of, I guess, the rumored 44 volumes, they'll have everything that EC ever put out, which is great. And there's an introduction by Max Allan Collins, because this is a crime volume, so who better than Max Allan Collins to write the intro there. Code of Honor, illustrated by John Severin. So this is John Severin when he takes over the war comics for Harvey Kurtzman when Kurtzman leaves them. And he would introduce more Western style war into some of those titles as well. So that's what you're seeing here. And like I said earlier, John Severin was noteworthy for having super accurate, detailed outfits and uniforms and artillery and weaponry and things for all these stories. Even so much so that historians would look at John Severin comics to get their own accuracy when they're talking about things. Deadly Beloved and Other Stories. This is Johnny Craig doing horror. And we have another introduction by Max Allan Collins. The spine in the back. Planetoid and Other Stories by Joe Orlando. So this is Joe Orlando doing more sci-fi stories. Joe Orlando's, again, one of the more underrated writers for EC. Bitter End and Other Stories by Reed Crandall. So this is Reed Crandall doing horror. Look at that image. Guy just being run over by a car. This is when we start to get to the Frederick Wortham and how these comics are ruining kids' brains or whatever stupid thing he was going on about. Kamen's Kalamity by Jack Kamen. So this is the only time that Jack Kamen, or the only volume that has the artist's name in the title of the book, because there was a story called Kamen's Calamity. Introduction by Tommy Burns. That's the first time I've seen, I think, his name on the cover. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. His name was on the cover earlier. But Tommy Burns is the EC fan addict, and he writes a lot of the introductions throughout all these libraries. He also has a YouTube channel called EC Fan Addict and a Facebook page, EC Fan Addict group, which I can't recommend subscribing to his channel and following and joining that Facebook group enough. They're both great resources if you love EC Comics. This is Kamen's Calamity. 27 Shockers from the Crypt, Vault, and Haunt. So this is Jack Kamen doing horror. And then the most recent volume we've gotten, Foul Play, which again, I have a whole video going over this entire book. If you want to, it was the first day of my horror Halloween's video, so it's the first video on the playlist. If you want to go back and see a little bit more of a deeper dive into this and why I think Jack Davis is such a great horror artist. But this is the thickest volume in the set so far. And there's the back cover. And that's it. That's the entire 37 volume collection that we have so far of EC Comics. I love this set so much. Please comment down below with any of your thoughts, questions, comments, whatever. And I'll reply to all comments. And let me know what your favorite volumes are, if you have these, or who your favorite EC artists are. I love talking EC Comics. I want to talk to you guys about that. Again, please subscribe. I have 31 videos coming out, at least one video every single day, coming out this month, showing off the horrors of Halloween and comics. And everyone, keep talking comics.